To begin, we know what your companies do. They are well known, three very different industries, but I want to begin with just a bit about your role within your companies. What has to go right every day and what you hope doesn't go wrong. So Tiffani, let's begin with you.
Sure, I get the wonderful pleasure of being able to meet with customers around the world and sort of share with them the art of the possible. As was just mentioned, technology is such a key part of growth and business today that it gives them some inspiration that others are facing the same challenges and others are also getting the greatest opportunities we have today.
All right, and Derek?
So I'm the Chief Diversity Officer at Colgate-Palmolive, and I am about the cultural transformation of the company. We have included diversity in our growth strategy as a key enabler for that. It is in our corporate purpose when we talk about creating an environment for all people in our planets, reimagining a healthier world for people, pets, and planets. And diversity is so critical for us to be able to deliver against both of those. We're trying to create that evolution so that our culture supports it in terms of inclusion is kind of the key focus of my life.
And Bunita, your role within Mastercard?
So I have the pleasure of serving our U.S. financial institution business for the North America region. But little known fact, Mastercard's not a credit card company. Yes. We are a payment technology organization, and we similarly are in a mission-driven purpose for inclusive growth. And we do that through technology for our end users, consumers and small businesses, but also for our employees, and making sure that what we do when we deliver is great experiences that are simple, safe, and secure.
And of course, technology is changing rapidly in all of our workplaces. And I want to ask you, how is technology changing the customer experience and also the interaction with the customers and your workforce? Tiffani.
Well, I think the pandemic really accelerated a lot of projects that were underway around how do we engage better with our customers, and our being the collective, right? But I would also say that on the consumer side, those experiences we have in our day-to-day lives are now threading through to what we do in our business lives. And so those expectations have forever changed. They're higher, it's immediate, it's speed, it's trust, it's all those things that drive in the consumer space are now sort of making their way into the business space. And I think that is creating this dynamic of how do we shift from B2C mentality into the B2B world when it comes to those experiences that our customers collectively want from us.
And I know that Salesforce services such a wide range and a huge number of companies in such diverse areas. I'm going to ask you more about that later. Derek, I know that you're looking at initiatives, but I also want to bring in that Colgate-Palmolive is products, and we've had supply chain issues, and you have customers around the world. What are, from your vantage point, what are you seeing with the impacts of technology that companies are relying more and more on these days?
Yeah, so let me start by, we are very much in the middle of a digital transformation as a company, and that goes across the way that we market to our consumers, about the way that we run the plants that we do, and we've hired recently a chief digital officer to be able to help guide us through that transformation so that we are much more aware of technology and incorporating it into the way that we gather and use data and think about how we will ultimately change the business. We've even restructured, particularly for the North American world now, our approach kind of in terms of the structure within the organization to make sure that we are effectively digital first in terms of how we are connecting with our consumers to be able to effectively drive the business.
Mm-hmm. And Bunita, as you pointed out, financial services company, millions and millions of transactions on a daily basis that also requires a lot of customer service. No doubt Mastercard has to leverage more technology in order to stay connected to the customer. How are you doing that?
Yeah, indeed, technology is the backbone of what we do, but it does require us to be thoughtful, scalable, safe, agile, inclusive. And there's a different adoption curve that we have to contemplate all around the world. Consumers need choices. They're not all the same. And the way we meet their needs means we have to understand them implicitly. That goes for employees as well, and make sure that we're delivering solutions that meet them where they are.
We were talking about digital transformation. I know, Tiffani, you brought that up. Derek, you brought that up. Derek, can you give us any examples of what's happening within Colgate-Palmolive about how work has changed since the pandemic when it comes to digital upscaling?
So one of the things that we are doing from a digital transformation part is, frankly, we're badging capability in terms of being able to provide training to the organization across the functions so that they are better understand the role of digital experts kind of within the organization so that they understand how to be able to connect with them. That is, again, as I mentioned, really now we've restructured the way that we are doing work from a marketing perspective to reach out to our consumers in a very digital fashion. So all of that no longer stays resident with the brand managers, which is historically how it used to be, but that work now goes to and is delivered by kind of a function within it that's about really integrated marketing, where digital is a key focus of that. I've got to come back to diversity now for a minute, that the core of all of this and the value of digital in terms of the way that we reach out to our consumers really does mean that we have to have a better and inherent understanding of who our consumers are, what motivates them, how to understand what their needs are, and digital is a key enabler for us to be able to do that, as well as internally making sure that we have people that understand kind of the starting foundation, if you will, for that kind of research. Any good marketer is going to be able to get the insights, but if you have a diverse organization, you actually get a head start, at least in terms of understanding some of the motivations that are there.
I want to ask you about that people challenge in a moment, but first, Tiffani, you have a unique position within Salesforce because they work with so many partner companies. Do you see trends within your partners as far as digital transformation?
I would say more and more the conversation is not just about how do we create greater connections with our customers, but also how do we create greater connections with our employees. You know, the fastest way to get customers to love your brand is to get employees to love their job. And we don't always digitally transform with our employee in mind. We do a lot of work to digitally transform for our customers to make it easier for them to do business with us and have these great experiences. But then we push the burden onto our employee, unfortunately. The average enterprise has 900 or so applications, and yet only 27% of them are integrated. And so that burden falls on the employee to say, how do I continue to deliver these compelling experiences for customers, because that's what I'm supposed to do every day. But organizations aren't always setting their employees up for success. So what's been great is hearing executives now contemplate that employees are much more into the conversation than they were, I think, pre-pandemic. And I think that has been a great result of a terrible couple of years we've had. So I'm excited to see how executives are starting to change that mindset a little bit and orient not only around being customer-centric, but also being very employee-focused.
I think this is a good point to address the issue that I would say every representative from every company in this room is facing, and that is the workforce shortage. Your three companies have massive workforces, tens and tens of thousands of people. Bunita, your workforce is also global. We know that everyone is having a hard time hiring. Can you tell us a little bit about the situation at Mastercard and how you are trying to find and recruit the right talent?
Yeah, indeed, it's a terrific question, and I actually want to build on the point that Tiffani made, which is around ensuring that we do remain focused on our employee base, and as a technology company, unlocking technology to support them and be able to connect, because the reality is one of the implications of the pandemic was feeling a little disconnected. Technology did bring that together, but did it bring me along with it? And so we created a program and a technology-based program called Unlocked at Mastercard. And what that is a platform that's AI-driven, that is employee-led, that allows our team members to connect with one another, whether through creating peer networking groups, whether to identify mentors and mentees, whether to be able to look for short-term assignments to allow them to upskill and try new roles with the safety and security of the role that they have. So as much as it's about attracting new talent and having a great purpose-driven brand that allows us to do that, but also ensuring that we're retaining and engaging the employees we have and fostering their growth and development through technology.
Derek, since you have a role with DEI, a lot of that involves retaining talent. So let me ask you the same question. What are you doing in order to both find and then keep that talent?
So I'd say there are three fundamental things that we are really working on as a company, and I'm going to start with the one that most directly impacts me, and that is really about building a culture of belonging. At the end of the day, we know that companies who have a higher incidence of belonging actually will outperform those that do not have it. It increases the retention of the employees, it increases their overall engagement, and their commitment to put effort into the work that they do every day. So making sure that everybody feels like they can be their authentic self, feels like they are really justified in impacting the business and capable of impacting the business is really critical for us to lay the foundation for retention going forward. The second is about the way that we work. We've got an effort that we've been working a couple of years now that we call FEED, which is all about focus, experimental, empowerment, and digital. to be able to effectively drive the business. And I want to talk about experimental and empowerment as two of the key things that become enablers for us, so that people feel empowered to make decisions like they own their business and they can actually affect the outcome, and that they can be more creative in terms of some of the solutions, borrowing from tech, so that it's something safe to try, then it's something that they will actually do on the business. And the last piece is really about career development, the career pathing, to make sure that the people in the organization believe and see that they have an opportunity to be able to move up within the organization and that they understand what that career path looks like for them. Focusing in those areas is really critical for us.
Derek, I want to stay with you for a moment because your career path changed. You went from managing the global toothbrush business, which I think would be actually fun, not just good for your health, but fun, to then going into strategy and initiatives. How did that happen, and what sort of upscaling did that involve on a personal level for you?
Okay, so I grew up as a commercial guy. Started in brand management, in marketing, then to general manager. I ran a Canadian business. Before this, I was running our global toothbrush business. And we got a call post-George Floyd to ask if I would consider doing this role, because I would hopefully approach it from a very different manner, so that we could actually accelerate our progress around building a more inclusive and diverse organization. I thought about it over a weekend and ultimately decided that there was a window of opportunity that I really did believe that we could help drive a cultural change, and I've really been enjoying doing it. This did mean that I needed to sort of step back and learn about diversity and inclusion, and really in short order to help create a strategy for the company on how we were going to deliver against diversity and inclusion. And that required me to do a lot of participation with outside organizations and panels to be able to sort of better understand the dynamic. It involved me talking to people within the organization that were diverse, as well as talking to the leaders of the organization for each of our divisions and each of our functions to kind of understand where they were, so we could then try to drive the change. There's a lot of socialization of the perspectives and the tasks that we are using to drive going forward. The one thing I do want to say, last piece, diversity and inclusion is not an initiative. It is who we are and the way that we think and the way that we operate. I would love for my job to go away, to not need to exist, but to do that, it requires long-term, intentional, consistent effort and education within the organization, and it needs to be pervasive in everything that we do. So it is, as I mentioned earlier, it's in our corporate strategy. It is in our corporate purpose. It is in the diversity strategy that we've created, and it's in the way that we work together every day.
And as we've seen, every research indicates that when you do achieve these initiatives, it affects the bottom line. Tiffani, you are the growth evangelist. So even as we face the problems of doing business in this era, every company wants to grow. And I want to dig into a little bit more about your saying that happiness within the workplace does impact growth. And to that, again, you work with so many different companies. What are you seeing? What needs to happen with companies in order to foster that growth with their workforce internally? And because of this, we're not seeing people, companies can't afford to lose employees that find better opportunities elsewhere. They have to grow within. So please speak about that.
Well, this is the first time we've had sort of 5 generations, in the workforce working, which means their expectations are very different. But as I briefly mentioned earlier, we've spent a lot of time as organizations hyper-focused on the customer. Customer experience, we're customer-centric. How do we improve the lives of our customers, which we do as well. Customer success is one of our core tenets. But I would say that what we, along the way, have forgotten about was, well, then what do we do for those employees? So they're looking for things. We went out and did some research and found that those brands that are really good at doing both employee experience and customer experience saw 1.8x faster growth rate than those that did not. So for $1 billion brand, it's a $40 million or so impact. That starts to get people interested. But if it's so obvious, why wasn't everyone doing it? And that tended to be the first comment I'd get back. Well, if it's so obvious, like, of course happy employees lead to happy customers. I'm like, of course, but are your employees happy? It's like, well, our once-a-year survey tells us that they're really happy. I'm like, okay, that's why you don't know what's going on and you're having quiet quitting and you're having this great resignation and all the terms that we've got going on. And so how do we start to really look into what are the attributes? So Edelman just, in their barometer trust report said that employees bounced to the #1 stakeholder for long-term company success. First time it was employee and not customer. And all of these things happening simultaneously show you that we have not been paying as much of attention to our employees as we could be, with whether it's diversity efforts, whether it's training and upskilling, all of that. But it's also trust, it's career development, it's seamless technology, it's C-suite alignment, the executives saying what they're doing and doing what they're saying. I mean, there's so much that goes underneath it. But I'm super excited to see that people are now starting to have these really difficult conversations about the fact that we need to start looking at, if we're going to be customer-centric, we've got to start paying attention to our employees more.
Bunita, a question for you, a challenge that's specific to financial services. You have to deal with a lot of data, not just storing the data, but you have to protect it and safeguard it. But a lot of jobs that are related to that can be tedious. Again, financial services requires a huge workforce. What are you doing to use automation that perhaps makes some of the jobs within Mastercard that were standard jobs 5 or 10 years ago to make them less tedious so the employees want to stay and grow within Mastercard?
Yeah, it's a great question, Janet. Look, we think about people from every aspect every day as part of our jobs, whether it's our end users, consumers and small business, or it's our employees. And that means we have to create those experiences, leveraging technology, keeping them safe and secure, but also having fun. And that means agility, always on listening, testing and learning, trying new things. One of the things that we do with our team members all across the world, regardless of the role that they play, they could be an engineer, they could be a salesperson, they could be an HR partner, right? Whatever role they play, they're all invited to be part of our innovation challenges. We do innovation challenges all around, and that allows us to bring the diversity of thinking, the diversity of everybody's perspectives into the moment where employees from various functions are winning patents because they get to be part of these challenges that see the light of day. We then put our support behind them, we invest in them, we test them with real people, including yourselves, and we make sure that there's something that are meeting specific needs. But we do bring the fun because we make sure that they get outside of their day jobs for a moment and have a chance at something new.
We love these words, fun and happiness. Quick question for all of you. This panel is flying by and we're approaching our final few minutes. But whenever there's change within a company, you find that there's some hesitation, maybe fear at worst, hesitation, uncertainty. So can I ask all three of you briefly how you get people on board when you want to make a change, whether it's with an initiative dealing with diversity or whether it's saying we're going to change how we do business? Tiffani, I know, again, you work with a lot of companies, so do you have any tips on how you can do this?
This is going to be a little cliche, right? But you have to have a beginner's mind, right? You cannot have that fixed mindset. You can't have that expert's mind to say, I've done this before, I know how to do it again, or we tried it 5 years ago and it failed, or that'll never work here because your culture won't accept it. Whatever the reason, you have to be willing to say, I'm going to try something, and even if I fail, or even if we fail, it's okay, we're going to learn and keep going. Do you measure failure or do you only measure success? I mean, that's a great way to say, am I really pushing the organization to try things that they might not have tried because they would have had the fear of quote unquote failing? And I think that is where, when you're talking to executives and you ask the question, what are you doing that makes you really uncomfortable? You start to get to the heart of what are the hard decisions they're having to make each day. And that requires at least a little bit of space and time every day to be, as the previous conversation, 20 minutes. What do you do during that time? Do you block 20 minutes every day to just really open your mind up, have conversations, and challenge everyone to try new things? And I think that is where people are getting excited and finding joy in what they get to do every day.
Derek, a question to you, and this is interesting because while DE&I initiatives have always been there, now it's in the forefront, which means that the change and the mind shift has to adjust hard right now, that it has to be something that every workforce thinks about. So how do you introduce these ideas and get fast adoption?
So I'm going to start, diversity and inclusion has been sort of a task for organizations for going on 50 years now, and it was very much because it's the right thing to do. And we have made no progress as industries against creating diverse organizations because it's the right thing to do. The key thing, I think, for any organizational change starts from actually showing the value of that change to the organization. What we now know is that more diverse and inclusive organizations outperform those that are less diverse and inclusive, and you have to be able to talk about that. What we know is that diverse and inclusive organizations improve the overall experience in the sense of belonging of the people that are in the company, and people are often the largest line item on our P&Ls. So when you think about optimizing and making sure that you're getting the most value out of the organization, doing that with the people in the organization matters an awful lot and delivers the return that we are actually looking for. And change less has to come from the people at the top, talking the talk and walking the walk and doing it consistently. It is not about one communication, it is about continuing to communicate. The last piece or second piece that I'd say is that this kind of change is very much driven by driving accountability into the organization, being transparent, measuring and telling people how you are performing against that measurement so they can see. And I'm not just talking about representation. For us, it's about inclusion, because we've created an inclusion index that we measure. We've actually included diversity scores in our corporate scorecards, so our bonus payout is now based upon that. We actually ask managers to create in their individual objectives every year a line item around what they're doing to make their team or themselves more inclusive. So making sure that you are driving that kind of accountability is really critical. And the last piece, if you're looking at driving this kind of change, is really to be intentional, persistent, and consistent in terms of the actions that you are doing to be able to do it. If they see, if you will, an initiative that is a one-time action and wow, look at what we did, and then nothing ever happens again, frankly, we don't make progress. So you have to be consistent on the behaviors.
Yeah, and Bunita, I want to build on this, but also with that challenge that because you are global companies, many times large teams will never ever meet each other. And so leading from the top means maybe taking some different actions so people can see those examples.
Indeed. Well, I love what you just said, Derek. It is about doing well and doing good. It is about having the return that comes from doing the right thing. It's not just principle, it's action. And we do that by making sure that in addition to the leadership having accountability goals, every single Mastercard employee has ESG objectives now, each one. And it's not just a goal that they don't know what it means. It comes with specific actions that we ask each person to take to make an impact. And we do that in various ways. I'll give you one example, right? There are so many different topics. To your point about, technology can be scary, and we have to bring everybody with us, and we're all on different adoption curves, but we have to meet people where they are. And so that means whether it's the topic of cryptocurrency or blockchain, or even just simple everyday payments, making sure we help people through where they are to get to where they need to be. An example is in India, right? We've helped move from cash economies to digital economies, even down to the vegetable vendor on the road who's accepting payment technology now. How did we do that? Well, we realized that not just getting them the technology, but how do they know what to do with it? WhatsApp is a pretty common denominator. And we just created some micro videos that helped them understand, what do I need to do with this? It's that easy. I can be part of this process, and I can be brought into this technology. So it's about inclusive growth, it's about accountability, and it's about doing the right thing by doing well and doing good.
We are under our final 2 minutes now, so very, very quickly, I said we wouldn't have a lightning round, but I do want to get a final thought from each of you of the big challenge that all companies should be looking ahead in the next few years. Of course, it's an uncertain economy. We have these workforce challenges. What are the big ideas that all companies need to be focused on in the next couple of years?
I'd say two things. One is we make a lot of brand promises. Yeah. I mean, we, the collective we, right? All companies go out there and make these amazing brand promises, but your employees are the keepers of those promises. So don't forget that whatever you say and expound on what you're going to be doing as a company and what the growth rate or what your expectations are, there are people that have to deliver against that, so make sure you take care of them. The second thing I'd say is that while rudimentary and simplistic, get back to basics. We've kind of overcomplicated a lot of things, and so getting back to taking care of our customers, doing what's well, doing good by doing well, and all of those things that go along with it, I'd say get back to basics.
Derek?
The Colgate brand is in more households than any other brand in the world, when you think about sort of category penetration for us. What's really important is for us to ensure that we are maintaining that by staying connected and aware of our consumers and the evolution of what their needs are, so that we can ensure that we are servicing their needs to ultimately deliver broader overall health as opposed to addressing any issue in a very, very narrow space.
Yeah.
All right,
I will
Bunita?
just build on your very right point, which is in order to be servicing needs of employees or end users or our customers, it's about listening. There's so much information and there's so much noise, and we have to find our ways, always on, not just once a year in a survey, right?
Right.
To be listening to our employees for their needs and authentically addressing them, and innovating to create creative ways to reach those needs going forward.
All right, Tiffani, Derek, Bunita, thank you so much for sharing your insights this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.